For the week of October 8th, we are moving on to our grammar bits and talking about sentence patterns and complements. And we call these the building blocks of a great sentence. So we're going to be building on our knowledge of prepositional phrases and using that to help us identify other parts of a sentence. So to start with today, students took notes on the four sentence patterns, and this is filled in, should be filled in at the top of the grammar bits number 6. We have every sentence has to have two things, a subject and a verb. And so once we get to looking at and examining the sentence, our verb could be categorized as either an action verb or a linking verb. And so with our action verbs, we have two different sentence patterns. If there's an action verb, we might see a direct object. And if we see a subject, an action verb, and a direct object, and there's still other words in the sentence, then we might look for an indirect object. And we'll talk a little bit more about how to find each of these things a little further in. We also have things called linking verbs, and there is a set number of linking verbs that students are just going to have to memorize. There's not an easy way to say you can recognize them, you just have to know them. And with linking verbs, following a linking verb, you could have a predicate adjective or a predicate noun. And these things following the verbs, we call them complements. They complete the meanings of the verbs. We have direct objects and indirect objects, which go with action verbs, and predicate adjectives and predicate nouns, which go with linking verbs. I introduced the term nominative in class, but we are not going to be using that. It's just something your grammar book refers to, and as you get a little bit into your higher grammars, maybe next year in high school, they're going to start calling it a predicate nominative, and I just wanted to make sure that we mention that. So, in looking at an action verb, an action verb tells what the subject does, and this could be a physical or mental action. And in class, we always say, is it something that you can do to determine if it's an action verb? So we started by using our knowledge of prepositional phrases to get rid of them. Through the streets is a prepositional phrase. Of New York is a prepositional phrase. If it's a prepositional phrase, it already has a job in the sentence, and so it's not going to be a subject or a verb or any type of complement. So once we get rid of those, we saw that we have a simple sentence left. King Kong stomps. So King Kong has to be our subject, and stomps has to be our action verb. It's an action that we can see. The next sentence, at the building, at the end, he climbs the Empire State Building. We have a prepositional phrase. So now we look for our subject, he, and the verb is climbs, and that again is an action we can see. If you're confused at finding your action verb, sometimes you might think the Empire State Building is the subject. Once you find your verb, you should ask yourself, is the Empire State Building climbing? And that doesn't make sense. So we've got a pronoun here, which refers back to King Kong. So rather than saying King Kong, we can use a pronoun in place of it. So he climbs. Down here we talked about another phrase that we could get rid of. It's not a prepositional phrase. This wasn't a positive, but again, if it's in a positive, it's not going to be a subject, it's not going to be a verb or a direct object or anything else. It's just going to be in a positive. It already has a job. So if we get rid of that a positive, we're left with everyone fears Kong. And so our subject is everyone, and fears is our action verb. And this time we've got a mental action, but fear is something that you can do in your head. Again, if you had thought that Kong was the subject, if you read that sentence after finding the verb and putting it together, it's not Kong that's doing the fearing, it's everyone that's fearing. And then our last one had no phrases in it, so we're just left with King Kong, and the action verb is loves. So now we're going to take that a step further and talk about direct objects. And students should have highlighted on their homework paper whom or what, because these are the questions we're going to use as we go through finding our direct objects. So again, we start by looking, are there any prepositional phrases, which there are not. So we look for a subject. Who is a sentence about? It's about the producers. What do the producers do? Well, the producers don't often. The producers borrow. So we've got a subject plus an action verb. If there's a subject and an action verb, we ask ourselves, producers borrow. Whom or what do they borrow? They borrow homes. So the word that answers that question, whom or what, is the direct object. The right house can charm viewers. We have no prepositional phrases, so we want to ask ourselves, what's the sentence about? The sentence is about a house. What does the house do? The house can charm. That's our action verb. So then we look for the house can charm. Whom or what can it charm? It can charm the viewers. So that's our direct object. Down here we do have a prepositional phrase, and we're actually only going to work with the beginning part of this sentence though. She heated some lima beans and ham. Who is the subject? She. What did she do? She heated. After we find an action verb, we ask ourselves, she heated whom or what did she heat? She heated lima beans, and we see that there's still something else in that sentence. She heated two things, lima beans and ham. So we have two direct objects for this sentence. Now that we can find a direct object using our question words, we move on to the next idea, which is finding indirect objects. And an indirect object, it's very important to know that it comes after an action verb and before the DO. It has to be in that order. And these are the questions that we're going to use to find them. So we're going to start with that sentence that we had last in that last slide. It had to do with lending a house. So we found a prepositional phrase, until summer. Got rid of that, and we're left with, we lent the producer our house. So who is the sentence about? We. What did we do? We lent. What or whom did we lend? We go back and we got to find our direct object first. So if we said we lent the producer, that doesn't really make sense because we can't lend a person, but we can lend a house. So once we find our direct object and we see that there are other words left in the middle, we can ask to whom or for whom. We lent our house. To whom or for whom did we lend our house? To the producer. Sorry about that. So producer is our indirect object. The next sentence, she offered us free movie passes for Friday. So for Friday is a prepositional phrase. We're going to get rid of that. The subject is she. What did she do? She offered. Whom or what did she offer? She offered us. But again, that doesn't make sense because you can't offer a person, but you can offer a movie pass. So that's our direct object. She offered movie passes to whom or for whom. Since we have some words left between our action verb and our direct object, we ask the question to whom or for whom. She offered passes to whom? To us. So us is our indirect object. Now if we look at the next sentence, it looks very, very similar. She offered the passes to us, and it looks like the meaning of it is very similar. But if we follow our process and we get rid of our prepositional phrase first, and we start again, she is the subject. What did she do? She offered. Offered is an action verb. What did she offer? She offered the passes. She offered the passes to whom? We do see that we could answer that. She offered the passes to us, but since it's already in a prepositional phrase, it can't do the job of an indirect object. It's already got a job. And also, it's not between your action verb and your direct object, so it can't be an indirect object. Now we'll be doing a lot more practice with this in class this week, so don't panic. And then tomorrow I'll put in another slide that shows you how to use linking verbs and finding predicate adjectives and predicate nouns.